Well, I think we'll just get started. Welcome. Thanks for coming in. We want to hear more about the jobs plan, but I'd like to start with a question about Act 10. Act 10 is, in many ways, the sort of central piece of legislation that was passed during Governor Walker's first term. I'm wondering what your view on it is, and if you would try to overturn or alter it if you became governor.
Sure. Well, if I had been governor, I would have made sure that that I bargained and negotiated for the changes that needed to be made to balance the state budget. And I think it was only fair to ask for contributions to health care and to pensions, but I think those could have been negotiated, certainly firmly, but fairly. It would have made sure that Wisconsin had gone forward in a united way. And I think that Act 10 divided our state. And it was very disruptive. As a business executive, executives are negotiating all the time, and the goal always is to leave those negotiations in a better place. And I think actually Wisconsin left those negotiations, walked away from the table, and left in a worse place. So I think I would have handled it differently. Going forward, though, I do believe that I'd work to restore collective bargaining. And I don't think that stands in the way of making sure that we have accountable, efficient, and effective public sector. And I see it in school board and in education all the time. And I'm concerned that we are able to attract and retain and keep good people in our public sector. Already we have seen in Wisconsin fewer people pursuing education as a career. We even see people certainly dropping out and saying, I'm not sure that I see a future in front of me in terms of pay and benefits where I'm going to be able to cover my student loans, be able to support myself and my family long term, and whether this is a profession that is going to be one that keeps good people. So I'm concerned about some of the impacts that it has had in terms of being able to attract and keep good people and have those careers, particularly in education, be ones where we can have thriving schools and therefore have thriving students.
So are there any aspects of Act 10 you would keep, or would you wholesale just sort of throw it out and start over? Other states have added measures. Massachusetts is one example to gain some control over benefits costs. What's your view on what's required?
Well, I think we do have to make sure that we are living within taxpayer means. And I serve on the Madison School Board. I'm known as sort of the fiscal conservative on the Madison School Board. Of course, I joke it is Madison, so that's all. It's all relative. But no, I mean, we have to make sure that we are competitive as a state in terms of our tax structure, in terms of the tax burden on people, and so we do have to keep pay and benefits in line. But we also still have to make sure it's competitive with the private sector if we want to get good people. And we want to make sure that they are that they're staying and that they're committed to the mission. But I think the aspects around collecting dues, through how those dues are collected, that is only fair to say that those can be collected through payroll deduction. I think in terms of certifying unions, again, I think it's only fair that it's a majority of those who vote, rather than those as eligible voters. But in the end, it is about making sure we do have a cost-effective, efficient, and accountable public sector.
On education, Erin, I think you had a question.
Hi, I'm Erin Richards. I cover education. Two of the most controversial issues in the state right now when it comes to education are the controversy over sending more public money to private schools and the Common Core state standards, which we saw get a lot of heat this last session. You've mentioned before that you're not in favor of the voucher program and the private school tax deduction program. Could you just talk a little bit more about whether you'd like to see the new voucher programs that have happened under Scott Walker's term be completely eliminated, meaning rolling back the scene in the statewide program altogether, or just limiting the students that are in those programs to the enrollment cap, at least in the statewide program that they're down, and then your views on the Common Core?
Sure, and I should clarify that because with regards to vouchers, I am definitely opposed to statewide voucher expansion, the expansion that we saw in this last year. The reason being is, we have seen here in Milwaukee where the program has been in place for quite a number of years that overall we're not seeing improvement in student learning. Students in the voucher program are not performing as a whole any better than Milwaukee Public School students. So I think when we use education and we advance initiatives, they should be ones that are based on research that is going to work and is going to improve student learning. I don't see that with the voucher program, and at the same time, it's draining money from the public schools. We saw in the budget that Walker proposed that there was not $1 increase for public school funding. There was no increase for the cap, and I'm concerned about the direction that the state is headed if we're trying to fund a secondary school system when, frankly, it doesn't look like we are able to fund adequately our schools, our public school system. You know, we have over 400 school districts in this state, and if you go around the state and you talk to people, whether it's Rhinelander or whether it's places like Superior, you hear from people that a lot of school districts were already quite lean before Act 10. You know, they already had contributions to healthcare, and they are not being able to cut any more to the bone. These are some small school districts. The superintendent is the high school principal and the football coach. I mean, and so these we have to be really aware of the impacts on education throughout the state when politicians in Madison make their policies. And I think that statewide expansion did not take into account what is going to ensure healthy, thriving school systems throughout this state. So with regards to that statewide voucher expansion, I didn't see anything that justified it, and I'm concerned about the impact going forward on public schools and their funding. In terms of the voucher program here in Milwaukee and in Racine, you know, this is a landscape that includes vouchers and charters and public schools. My emphasis is going to be on building on what's working, putting in accountability, and making sure that the choices that parents and students have are good choices. We have to focus on excellence and improvement. Stop fighting the battles between voucher and charter and public and say instead, let's bring everyone to the table. Let's figure out how we're going to make this work. These are challenging issues. They're not easy issues by any means. But I have worked in education over the last 6 years, and I believe very firmly and passionately that we can make progress in these areas. So I think the landscape in Milwaukee is what it is. Let's focus on excellence and moving forward. Let's not fight the battles of a voucher and charter and public schools.
So you wouldn't seek to curtail choice here? You wouldn't look to push it back?
No, I wouldn't do that. What I would look for, though, is accountability and making sure that we are, we have, whether you look at public, charter, voucher, you have good schools in each one of those programs. You also have bad schools in each one of those. So I think the thing is to build on the good schools and the good things that are happening and make sure that we are changing where we are not getting, where students are not having the experience and the education and support that they need.
So would it be fair to say you support eliminating the statewide program but working for more quality and accountability for the Racine and the Milwaukee programs?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Would you roll back the tax credit that was just passed for people who send their kids to private schools?
Yeah, yes, I would. You know, I think balancing a budget and making investments to move the state forward means setting priorities. And I think that's a new entitlement program that isn't needed. It's not improving our schools. It's not improving education. And just like this expansion of the vouchers statewide, you saw over 75% of the students who enrolled in that were already in private schools. So these are, again, precious taxpayer monies that actually aren't improving anything with regards to education. Erin, did we want to go back to the Common Core?
Yeah, just talk a little bit about your perspective on that. Do you support them as they are written and being implemented in schools right now?
Oh, well, there's, two different things. As written, I think there is a lot of good work in Common Core, and I definitely support it. It would be a huge step forward for Wisconsin. Our education standards, by one measurement, are 38th in the country. We are greatly underperforming where we need to be in terms of making sure that students are graduating career and college ready. Common Core really looks at the building of the critical thinking skills that are needed for students to get to that point. And if you look at where we are right now on that, on how well we're doing, the latest WKCEs came out just a few weeks ago, and we're really low, and we have to improve. So getting up to where the Common Core is would be a huge step forward for Wisconsin. And everyone understands that's a floor. That doesn't mean that we can't have higher standards or higher learning within our schools. But I met with a principal in one of the schools, and I asked him about what he was hearing from people regarding Common Core. And he says, every time that there's some parents who come in and question Common Core, and I ask them to go through it and ask if they have looked at it, and then ask them the question, what in there is something that you wouldn't want your child learning? And it's really good stuff. And so I think it's not about saying exactly what you learned, but how you're learning, and goes a long way to making sure students are college and career ready. So this is where one area of many that Governor Walker and I differ in opinion. And it's absolutely critical. To your point, Erin, though, about implementation, implementation is really important. You can set standards out there, but if they're not well implemented, they're not going to be successful. What I've seen in terms of successful implementation is where you do have teachers in the classroom involved in what they call unpacking the standards. So how it is applied to classrooms and schools, so that teachers are able to incorporate it in a way that it is effective in terms of their classrooms, and that they're buying in. We have to improve instructional practices in our classrooms. That's really where the rubber hits the road. It's what impacts student learning the most. And so having the standards implemented in a way that is effective in the schools by engaging those schools and those teachers in it is really critically important. And the state has, in the last 3 years, there have been a lot of good work going on, but this is really how we can make sure that we are moving education forward in Wisconsin.
We'll move to economic development. Governor Walker promised that the state would create 250,000 private sector jobs during his first term. That looks very unlikely to happen at this point. But the question is, what can any governor really do to create jobs? And I wondered if you could talk just for a minute about that.
Well, I think in Governor Walker's promise, which, right now he's nearly 150,000 jobs short of that promise, is that, if you make a promise, you should have a plan and know how you're going to deliver on that promise. And so obviously he must think that the governor has a great influence over that, or my guess is he wouldn't have made that promise. I think that there's a lot that a governor can do. There's the short term, and then there's the longer term as well. In the short term, you can there are the skills around worker development, making sure we are aligning the job openings with the skills of workers. I was just up at Fox Valley Tech yesterday. I heard from an instructor there about some of the work that is being done and what he has seen in terms of displaced workers and the type of counseling and direction that they're getting through DWD in terms of what job openings there are, what skills that they need, and said that he looks at it and he's like, they haven't, he sees positions on there that he says, there hasn't been hiring for those positions in years. And he was talking about, the 800 people at Oshkosh Truck that will be losing their jobs. So you can, as governor, make sure that we are having the processes, the people, the knowledge in place that connects people who are losing jobs with the skills and the openings in new job fields. So some of this is when you take these small pieces and you add them up, they can have a substantial impact. So again, it gets back to implementation. Whether you're talking about Common Core standards, or whether you're talking about how effectively workforce development is working in terms of putting displaced workers back to work, those are all really critical things. Around the issues of access to capital and things like venture capital funds. Certainly, new business startups are something that's important, very important. Something like 70% of new jobs being created are ones from new businesses or small business growth. And so having adequate capital available for businesses to get started and grow can have impacts. And we've seen that Wisconsin is lagging. We're 46th in the country in terms of new business startups, and we have a long way to go. And we're lagging in terms of venture capital funds that are available in this state compared to other states around us. So I'd say those are just, two areas in the short term, but I would say also in the longer term, you get to education. I believe education is the driver of a state's economy and the type of jobs that we're going to have, and whether we have students who are graduating college and career ready, whether they have the skills in order to compete, and therefore Wisconsin can compete, whether you're able to attract employers to the state, or whether employers choose to grow here because they're able to have a great workforce. All of those things come into play. And in my Invest for Success plan, we lay out quite a bit of research that looks at not only the number of jobs that are going to require post-secondary education, but also those types of certificates, degrees that are going to be necessary. And so, this indicates that there's, I'm on page 10, 670,000. Wisconsin will need 670,000 more certificate or degree holders by 2025 to compete for the jobs of the future. This is from the Lumina Foundation. And so being able to increase the capacity of higher education, the effectiveness, because we can't keep driving up the cost as well if we're going to do that. But then we also have to align around what the workplace needs are. Right now, I think we need to redefine our high school experience. We have too many students who graduate high school, and it's the decisions are: am I going on to college, 4-year program, or what am I going to do? And what they find is there's not a whole lot of jobs out there other than minimum wage jobs without benefits if all you have is a high school degree. States that are really moving ahead and doing well are looking at having high school be the first step, but starting early in terms of personalized career paths, so that students start right away in their freshman year and start looking at what they might have an interest in, what type of courses they should be taking, whether they can have internships, so that when they're graduating, they actually know, okay, these are the things I am interested in, these are the courses, this is my next step. And is a 4-year college the right path for them? Maybe they just need a certificate in a skilled trade, maybe a 2-year. That's for them to decide, but that's what we should be doing and determining in high school. It's too late. Our education system has not kept pace with the economy. 25, 30 years ago, you could graduate from high school. You could get a good paying job. You didn't have to think, long-term necessarily about your career. Unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. We know that 70% of the jobs in the future will require some type of training or education post-high school. And so we need to be setting that direction early on in high school. So I think education is clearly a driver, and aligning it with workforce needs in terms of those projections is important, not only from meeting those needs and attracting employers and helping employers to grow and feel confident that they can get the workers they need here in Wisconsin, but it's also important in terms of keeping down the cost of education. And I was up at Western Tech in La Crosse earlier this week, and I talked with some students who were in the physical therapy program. And I asked them, how did they get here? How did they decide to get into this program? What was their path to doing that? Out of the four that were in that room that I had talked to, one was a veteran who was coming back and decided this is an area they wanted to be in because they wanted to help other people. They saw through their experience that there was a real need, particularly with veterans, but coming back to school. Another person had already completed a 4-year degree, but was coming back and because they realized that's not really what they wanted to do. So they are now entering a program that doesn't require a 4-year degree with a student debt load that they could have saved if we had that type of counseling and work in high school. And another one of the students did 1 year in a 4-year program, then decided against it. So, and every time I have a roundtable with students and I just ask that question and pose about a role for high school really being to start that career path work then, and how do they think, and do they think that's a good idea? It's like everyone's just nodding their heads. When I talk to parents who are there about, where their students are and their kids and whether they're graduating and how much they know about careers and whether we should be doing more of that work in high school, I always get a lot of nodding heads. It just makes common sense. And so I believe we have to be driving our economy through our education system. And I am very concerned about the cuts that we have seen to K-12, the cuts to our technical college, and certainly our university system, and whether we're supporting it in a way that is going to keep tuition down, but it also is going to be making sure that we have strong post-secondary institutions.
Let me ask you about WEDC, which was a creation of the state right after the governor took office. Would you have done that? And if you become governor, would you seek to alter WEDC in any way?
Well, I think the importance at that time, when you think about where our economy was coming out of, a very, very deep recession, I would have been focused on what needed to be done to immediately increase jobs. And I think that there was a lot of wasted effort in terms of changing the form instead of looking at the effectiveness. And what we saw with incredibly poor management and rollout of this new agency is that it hurt the effectiveness, that you saw constant changes in leadership. And then most recently we saw that WEDC did not even expend the resources that have been appropriated to it. So I think what I look at is the effectiveness. I don't really look at whether the form is one that is most important. But I question whether it's being as effective as it can be. But going forward, that's what I'd focus on. I'm not going, again, I'm looking forward, and I wouldn't look to change the form of it.
To go back to the Department of Commerce, which you had. Okay.
Half step backwards on college tuition. The governor wants to freeze it for another 2 years. Where are you on that issue?
Well, I think we have to keep the cost of tuition down. We have been seeing increases that are, 5% a year. That's unacceptable. Students can't afford that. We see students graduating with really high debt levels, across the country. So I have, in the work that I've done, whether it's at Trek Bicycle as an executive there, whether it's board chair of the Boys and Girls Club, I know how to look through budgets, and I know how to figure out how to reduce costs. So I would sit down with our universities and our technical colleges and say, hey, how are we going to hold tuition down? We need to increase capacity because we need to be able to make sure that more students are getting education post-high school. But we also have to hold costs down. I'd ask them for their ideas. What I have heard from chancellors at our university is, yes, hold us accountable. You know what? We have to be part of this, but also give us added flexibility so that we can look at other ways of being able to hold costs down, still increase capacity, make sure we're adding in areas where we have in high need areas for certain types of degrees. And that's all going to be the drivers. But I am concerned with just saying, okay, all we're going to do is freeze tuition. Because I think that sort of sounds like the easy answer, rather than looking at actually the fundamental underlying issues that are driving tuition up. You know, you look here in Milwaukee, UWM is an incredibly important institution to the city of Milwaukee and to this whole area. They have brought up for many years that they're greatly underfunded in terms of their state support. So what does a tuition freeze do to UWM and its ability to fulfill its mission, to make sure it's graduating great students, that it's having the maximum impact on economic development here in Milwaukee? So I would want to look at all of those things, but first and foremost, I would be very focused on keeping tuition down, and that's why in my plan I look at increased deductibility of tuition and fees. I look at deductibility of student loan payments. Those are also important.
But doesn't this issue sort of drive home the differences in style, perhaps governing style, between you and Governor Walker? He's taken a position, said, I'm freezing college tuition, or I want college tuitions frozen for 2 more years, and therefore people will have to react to that, meaning the institutions. Whereas you're saying, I want to look at this, I want to look at that, but you're not committing to a goal, let's freeze it for 2 years.
Well, you're looking, I don't think, frankly, that decision needs to be made at this point. You know, I wonder why Governor Walker is saying that when we're not even close to that time frame. I think he's saying it to try to win votes. You know, I take a smarter approach to things. I take a thorough approach and say, yeah, let's look, this is a serious issue. But first of all, we're not into that 2-year budget cycle yet anyway. We have quite a ways to go. So let's look at this issue. Let's look at this surplus. How much of this is committed? Is it really committed? I mean, making sure that that's the way. And then absolutely looking at whether it's the smart thing is to go into that next budget and say, you know what, you guys, you just have to keep it frozen. We have to keep it level. Hey, over time, I'd like to see decreases in it. You know, so this is about taking a different approach. I agree with it, but it doesn't mean I'm any less committed to getting the cost of education down. I just want to do it in a smart way that's not going to undermine our university and higher education ability to produce graduates.
Are there other revenue streams you would look to fund fund the university?
Well, I would look to every single one. I mean, I think we have to look at just, overall. I just believe in going line item by line item through budgets, not only revenue streams, but cost streams, seeing how we can leverage both private and public resources. Are there additional resources that could be gained on the federal level? Are there cost savings that could be done through greater partnerships? I created an education program in Madison called Avid Tops. It was bringing together the Boys and Girls Club and the public schools, because as board chair of the Boys and Girls Club for 9 years, I didn't see enough of the students that we worked with graduating high school and thinking about going on to college or being prepared for college. And we put together a program that's incredibly cost effective. The public schools could never have done it on their own because they don't have the resources to pay for extra tutors or for college field trips. The Boys and Girls Club could never have done it on their own because they don't have the students for a long enough period of time or have the expertise in order to help them prepare to get them on the college path. And so we marry the two programs. We work in collaboration and partnership. We now have 650 teens in this program. We already have 100 that have gone on to college. So sometimes the best ways of reducing costs and being effective are actually creating partnerships and collaborations that leverage the resources in different organizations. So we should be looking at all of these ways. I mean, that's frankly how we address the real fundamental issues, the really tough issues that we have are going to be addressed by looking at them in collaboration.
Do you think the state should be involved in helping the Bucks build a new arena? And if so, would you favor it? A regional tax, a super TIF, or bonding, or what would you favor?
Well, first and foremost, I think we try to get people at the table to figure out what all the options are. And certainly having $200 million is a really, really good start. But are there other ways of being able to bring private investment into this, private financing that could over time be paid off? I think all of those should be investigated and supported and pushed. And that public funding of it should be one of the last options that's looked at. But it certainly should be looked at and should be on the table. But I think it has to be supported by the taxpayers. You know, this is not something that people can just can be done without having public support for the projects.
In what sense? In tax increase or bonding, or in what way?
I'd look at all the different options, but to figure out which ones do have make the most sense, have the greatest amount of public support. But I think a lot has changed in just the last couple of days, you know, from where it stood a week ago. And I think it is time to look at different options. And it's a very different thing to plug a $200 million hole than it is a $400 million hole.
So you wouldn't rule off the table a regional tax increase to pay for it?
I wouldn't rule it out, but it'd be just one of all the options that we should be looking at. And in the end, it does have to be about what is going to benefit most Milwaukee and the Milwaukee region.
As governor, would you support some state support?
I'd have to
State
look at
financing?
only if it's the best option for the people of the state of Wisconsin.
I'm not sure what that means. So only if, what would it mean for, to give state dollars? What would it require for it to be in the best interest of the taxpayers?
That you could go to the people and make a really clear case that this is in the best interest. So the best interest is economic. I think it can be measured in terms of economic impact, whether it's room taxes, whether it's increased tourist dollars, whether it's just what the teams and the other events generate. But
Would you have a referendum like they did in the
I think only if it was clear that information was needed. I mean, Dan, I think that there's a lot of different ways that this could possibly be funded and to be looked at. I don't think that referendum or additional sales tax increase is necessarily the way that it would need to go. And so I would hope that there's other options that frankly would have greater public support. I think we've already seen in some of the outlying counties that there's county boards that have already voted and saying they're not in favor of it. So I don't see anything that you're shoving down people's throats that people don't want to have.
Are you optimistic or pessimistic that this will happen?
I'm optimistic, absolutely.
This would be a key development for Milwaukee. Do you think the state is doing enough for Milwaukee? Are the Republicans waging war on Milwaukee? And what would you do to improve that?
I don't think there is enough that is being done. The Milwaukee area accounts for over a third of the state's economy. Milwaukee, I grew up in this area. My dad's first business that he had was down on Virginia Street, and both my parents went to Marquette. And so, I grew up going and watching Marquette and Al McGuire and the basketball games. And so Milwaukee is near and dear to my heart. I believe Milwaukee can be can be a first-class city, but we have to take on the challenges here. You know, we have to say that we are going to take on education in Milwaukee, and we're going to make sure it's a thriving urban school district that is leading the way in terms of closing the gaps that exist. We have to take on unemployment in the central city. There's just no way you can have unemployment be that high and think that we're going to have a vibrant urban area. So these are issues. So I think that there is a lot more that can be done. Is it going to be tough work? Absolutely. But I'll tell you, Milwaukee is a great community with people who are really committed to seeing good things happen here. I think that people want to be part of positive change here in Milwaukee, and we need to do more. And in my jobs plan, I outline certain types of initiatives, like they're doing in Cleveland in terms of the Cleveland Clinic as an anchor institution. And you know, anchor institutions can be large employers, they can be healthcare complexes, they can be universities and educational institutions that really look at their impact beyond their own walls. They look at their impact on the neighborhoods around them, and they ask, how can they be a part of regenerating and addressing the issues that exist in those neighborhoods? So can they help a business get started or grow, a small business start or grow that maybe is a laundry service? And rather than outsourcing that to a company that probably isn't even headquartered in this state, instead they're helping to create a small business that actually thrives, keeps wealth, or actually generates wealth in the community. And that's just one example. But the Cleveland Clinic has taken that on, and it's had significant impact in terms of business development, wealth generation, and jobs around in the neighborhood that it has.
Do you think that the rest of the state recognizes or believes that Milwaukee is important to Wisconsin?
You know, I'm sure there's people on both sides of the issue, or those who you know aren't. But as governor, I think you have to use that bully pulpit to lead, to say every aspect and every area of this state is important, and to show that. That's what leadership is about. And in the jobs plan, I do show the regional growth rates over the last, since 2000. It's from the Wisconsin Taxpayer Alliance study. And it shows that you know, southeastern Wisconsin here has lost 5% of its jobs. That's very concerning. We do need to make sure that we are growing jobs in an area that is so vital to the state's economy. But if you also look, the other area of the state that has lost 5% of its jobs is the northern part of the state. I'm as concerned about that. Now, it's not as big of a piece of the state's economy, but as governor, I'm going to make sure that we increase in the jobs in the northern area of the state as well, and say that that is important to who we are in Wisconsin, and make sure that we're focused on that. So, you know, it's about leadership. It's about setting a tone, and it's about saying that we are one state.
Would you support the mine that would add jobs to northern Wisconsin?
I don't support the mine in terms of the regulations that were recently passed. I think we greatly weakened the environmental protections. There was a real opportunity with that to have bipartisan support for changing those regulations. That was proposed by Senator Schultz and Cullen and Jauch, and that was just pushed aside. As soon as the Republicans saw that they have enough votes to pass regulations that were frankly almost written by a mining company, you know, bipartisan legislation was put aside. So instead we passed something that greatly weakened the environmental protections. In the end, I'm not sure it's even, I think it's making things more difficult because now there's the federal process and now there's the state process, and now you need to follow both. So that wasn't necessary. So we have seen states like Minnesota who have strong mining industries but still have the environmental protections.
Or even if you win, the assembly.
You don't mean if, Dan, do you?
He misspoke.
Even?
The assembly's still going to be Republican. The Senate might be. I'm hearing talk about all these topics from collective bargaining. I'm saying not going to happen. This tax rollback not going to happen. This environmental deal changing it on that's not going to happen. Is there anything that you think, if you're elected, that you could accomplish with a Republican legislature?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at a lot of what I have in jobs, I think economic development is an area where you can find common ground. And the reason, and I'll tell you, I know, is that, I've already done the type of outreach to see whether there is common ground. And I sat down, when I was Commerce Secretary, I had met Dan Ahrens and had visited Ahrens and Brilliant and toured that factory. And so when I saw that Dan Ahrens was going to be the new chair of WMC, I called him up and had a conversation with him and decided after that phone call to sit down with Kurt Bauer, head of WMC, and I sort of joke and say, somehow I don't think they're going to be with me in this campaign. But it doesn't mean we can't talk. And I'll tell you, after sitting down with Kurt, I left that meeting feeling like we definitely have common ground. There is definitely things that we can work on together. And so whether it's WMC or it's the Bankers Association, those are conversations I want to have.
But that's sort of squishy. Economic development we'll be able to work on together. Is there any policy proposals where you think you could work with Robin Voss to come to agreement on something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Name one.
Well, economic development's those are a lot of areas of policy development. Certainly around education, I would hope that we can find common ground on those. So those are frankly the areas that I think are most important to the people of Wisconsin. I hear it every time that I travel around the state. People care. They care about jobs, not only for themselves, but for their kids who are graduating, and whether those jobs exist and whether they're good paying jobs. It's certainly around education, and people want to have good education for their students. They want to make sure that it's affordable and that they're able to stay in school and get a degree and then get a good job. So I think that there's a lot of areas. We have to look in the state at how we're going to bring down the costs of health care. I think that's an area that Republican legislators are very interested in. So I think you have to, I'm just the type of person who believes in finding common ground that focuses on the issues and works to address those.
So everybody thinks this is going to be a Republican year. It's off-year election, opposite of the presidential president. It's usually that way. How much would you have to spend to win this race? 15, 20, 25 million? How much?
Yeah, and it has to be enough that I can get my message out. And you're right, it is important to, I need to define myself before they define me. But I wouldn't have gotten into this race if I didn't think that I could raise the type of resources that are going to be necessary.
So Bill accused you of being squishy a little bit earlier. I think that's what he was implying.
Did I?
You're not going to give us a number? Would you need at least $20 million to win, do you think?
No, I don't think I do. And I think the reason, campaigns are, you're adjusting every day, every week, right? And you have to, I certainly have to be prepared. As I said, if I'm going to be able to define myself before they define me, the Republican Governors Association went on attack in February, right? The earliest that they have gone up in defense of any incumbent governor in the United States. Did it surprise me? No, it didn't surprise me. Did it mean I had to spend money earlier than I wanted to? Yeah, it did, because I needed to answer. I couldn't let them define me that early. So it changes, and that's what's, if you're going to run a smart campaign, you need to be able to be flexible and to adjust to what's going on.
How would you redefine Governor Walker? Obviously, you've talked about defining yourself before you get defined by them, but are there a couple areas where you hope voters would reconsider what they think about him? What would you tell people?
Well, what's important is that the voters of Wisconsin know what Governor Walker's record is, and that they're able to see, you know, out of 10 Midwestern states, we're 9th in terms of job creation. So while he spins that he's creating these jobs, frankly, we're lagging. I mean, we're falling behind. If we had grown at just the average of the rest of the United States over the last 3 years, the impact on our state's economy would be roughly something like $1.9 billion a year. You know, that additional job creation has a big impact on the economy. So it is relative. We were coming from one of the lowest points. And so yes, there's been job growth, but relative to other states, we're falling behind. And not only the Midwest, but in the U.S. That's important. You know, I think the people of Wisconsin want to know that.
Can I talk about one more issue here? You've strongly criticized the governor and Republicans on abortion and equal pay, repealing the Equal Pay Enforcement Act. The Democrats often say that there's a war on women being conducted by the governor and the GOP. Do you agree with that, or does that go too far?
Well, I think it is an attack on women's freedom, you know, the freedom to make our own health care choices. I don't know why politicians in Madison think that somehow that should be their decision. You know, these are serious decisions that women make, you know, with their families, with their physicians, and aligned with their religious beliefs. And I don't think that Madison politicians should have a role in that.
What else would you do to make a case specifically to women to vote for you?
Well, I think that, you know, repealing the equal pay is something that's important to women of Wisconsin. And if you look nationwide, something like 40% of families with children under the age of 18 are homes where the woman is the top breadwinner. So when you look and say women are earning 80 cents on the dollar compared to men, that's a serious issue in lives of a lot of women and a lot of families. It has an impact that goes beyond women. So, you know, I'm running for governor based on being the best leader for this state, and not being the best leader for women or for men, but for the people of Wisconsin. And so there are specific issues related to gender, but most of the issues are ones that affect families in Wisconsin, people in Wisconsin, regardless of gender.
In Democratic races around the country, involved, you know, that are just now heating up, outside money has already started to play a very large role.
Yeah.
Do you think the presence of money from outside Wisconsin coming in and potentially supporting Governor Walker will help him or hurt him?
Well, it's certainly, you know, he raises more than 50% of his money from outside of the state of Wisconsin, and it makes me sick to think that people from outside of the state, you know, are going to influence and possibly buy our governorship. So, no, I think it's, you know, I feel we should be headed in a direction that looks to limit, you know, the influence of forces, particularly outside of our state, and I think it certainly presents an advantage. But I also feel that the type of campaign that I'm running is one that's going to, you know, raise the vast majority of the money from inside of the state. We have a grassroots fundraising initiative called The Power of Your 10, and I say to people every day, you know, just do what you can. And that'll make a difference on whether it's $10 a month and then getting 10 of your friends to do the same thing, or whether it's you can only afford $5 a month. Do what you can, and that's how you can play a role in making sure that you have the type of leadership you want to have in Wisconsin.
You just had a fundraiser outside the state, though, in New York, did you not?
And as I said, Dan, the vast majority of my money will come from inside of the state of Wisconsin.
Okay.
You've been critical of the state's increased debt under Governor Walker, but what would you have done differently to avoid that? We were facing a fairly large budget deficit when he took office.
Well, you certainly look and say, right now, with the recent decision to take a projected surplus, which is only projected at this point, and I have said I've called that irresponsible because, this is spending money we don't even have yet. I don't know a whole lot of families that rush out and spend money before they actually have it and after they have risen and added on debt. And so, I would make sure that we are paying down debt or we're putting it in the rainy day fund before we go out and spend it. And so there's a lot of different areas to look at. Again, looking through the entire state budget. Are we spending money in the most effective way that we can? And state spending has increased by $4.6 billion under this administration. So there is a lot of it. When you have a $70 billion biennium budget, there's a lot of money being spent in there. So I would certainly go line item by line item and figure out, are there ways that we could save money? Are there areas that we're spending that we don't need to be spending, or programs that are not being effective?
Would you seek to repeal the tax cuts that Walker's put in place, either earlier or the most recent ones, as a way to reduce and bring that budget into balance?
I plan to hold the line on taxes. I think that it is important that we have a good business climate, that we have a tax system that's fair. I would certainly look to change, and I thought it was wrong to increase taxes, frankly, on the working poor by reducing the earned income tax credit at the same time that you are giving tax breaks to those at the top. What I'm most concerned about is certainly the tax burden on middle class families. But the best way to get taxes down is to grow the base, to grow the economy. And that's how we're going in the long run to make sure we're making the investments that are needed to move Wisconsin forward, but also keeping taxes low.
You talked about the governor's use of the surplus, though, and some of that went to tax cuts. A small amount went to the rainy day fund. What would your mix have been? Would you have also cut taxes, given the same set of
Yeah, I would have
circumstances?
taken like half of it and done that because
cut
again,
taxes.
yes.
Okay.
And the reason is, again, we're not at the point at which we're able to say that money's going to be there. There's a lot that can change between now and June 30th of 2015, and so being able to pay down debt or put it in the rainy day fund really provides a more responsible approach to a projection. But certainly a tax cut and then some additional money into worker training to address really immediate needs, I think is the way I would have approached it.
You mentioned going to go through the budget line by line, looking for things to eliminate. What are a couple things, specific things that you eliminate?
Well, I just think that any of the areas there's going to be things, and I think we have to take on overall. We spend a growing part of the budget is Medicaid, and looking at how we can pull down those costs. It is really important. I've also mentioned that I would certainly have rolled back the statewide expansion of vouchers and the money that was in there. I would not have the private school tuition tax deduction, but in a $70 billion budget, I know that there's areas and money that's not being wisely spent.
Reading between the lines, it looks like you're leaning in favor of the Kenosha Casino, and I don't want to hear all the arguments for and against, but is that a fair reading? I know there's a study being done and so forth. You've criticized Walker for taking his time on this issue, but is it fair to say that you are leaning in favor of the project or not?
No, I wouldn't say that is fair. What I've said is to say, I would have right from the start, once this question came to me, which was back in October, I said the same thing then as I say now, is I would have had an independent study done immediately. It took Walker, 6 months to come to that after laying out 4 criteria, which now he doesn't seem to be following. Now he's backtracking, now doing a study, now asking for more time. It seems politically motivated to me that he's just trying not to make a decision before the elections. But I would have had the study commissioned immediately. It is important to have a nonpartisan or non-biased study done. I don't think either party in the studies that they do, there's no way that they're not biased in favor of what they want to have happen. So it is important. And if that study showed that it would have significant positive impact on our state's economy, yes, I would approve it, because we're not only this only isn't just about Milwaukee and Kenosha. We're in competition with operations in Illinois and Iowa, and we're not talking just about gaming, but we're talking about entertainment. So if those opportunities exist to grow jobs and grow the economy in the state, I would certainly favor it.
The Republican ads have hit you again and again, and I'm assuming they've got research that indicates this is a topic of interest on the issue of outsourcing at Trek. I know you've said you were not involved in the 2 times that Trek has been found to have outsourced, but there was a story this week in which someone said that your role was, as the director of forecasting, was to help determine how much work needed to be done in China as opposed to other places. Did you have a role at all at Trek in terms of deciding, what work should be done outside of Wisconsin and outside the U.S.?
No.
Did you have any role in terms of outsourcing at all at Trek?
No, I haven't seen that report or article, but Trek has nearly 1,000 jobs right here in Wisconsin, produces more bikes in the U.S. and in Wisconsin than any other company. Its payroll has more than doubled in the last 20 years here in Wisconsin. The jobs are different, but that's not unusual. And so what Trek has done is, it's done what it needed to do in order to be competitive, but it's competing against companies. Its competitors don't make one bike in the United States. And so Trek does what it can to keep manufacturing here, and it does more than any other company.
What percentage of bikes are made outside the U.S.?
I don't know what the percentage is, but I can tell you that Trek produces more bikes here than any other company.
One thing that's been talked about lately has been the high incarceration rate of African American males, especially here in Milwaukee. Yeah. We're actually working on a project on that now. What would you do to take a look at why that problem has been persistent for so long, and why does Wisconsin lead the nation in locking up African American men?
Well, we have to look into the issue, because that's not a situation that is acceptable. And there are a lot of other states, real Republican states like Texas, that are looking at other options and saying that, one, this isn't smart economically, because we know once people go into prison, the rate of recidivism and the chances of going back in keep getting higher and higher. And the impact on a community, not only the economic impact, but impact on families and on children, is an additional cost that isn't even considered. So we have to look at, one is certainly prevention and unemployment. And there's no doubt that that plays a huge role, and we have to make sure that people have job opportunities. And so whether it's looking at how we can keep people out of prison, what are other alternatives and options that still keep our communities safe, but saying is it the best option to put people in prison? We have to have better reentry programs so that when people are getting out of prison, they're able to find jobs, they're able to have housing, they're able to get the type of support services, whether they're mental health or addiction services, that are going to make sure that they are able to support themselves and not reenter reenter prison. So there's a lot of things that have to come into play in this, but there are other states that are looking at different ways and saying it makes a whole lot of sense. And we know here in Wisconsin we spend almost twice as a state what Minnesota does in terms of corrections, and yet our incidences of crime are no higher. So I think it's an area that we really have to look at and look at how it could be done better.
So if you were elected, would you consider reviving the high-speed train debate? Would you consider going back to the administration and seeing if any of that money is still available for a high-speed train?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that was a decision by Walker that set this state back. To think about $800 million, thousands of construction jobs in much-needed areas of the state, along with the long-term impact of being able to link us up with growing economies in Chicago and the Twin Cities. Is really important. And when you think about that long-term decline in jobs in southeastern Wisconsin of 5%, we have to do things that are going to turn that around. We have to be bold. We have to be aggressive. We have to be out there fighting for the type of support like high-speed rail that's going to help us build the infrastructure that moves us and helps us develop an economy for the future.
Are there any other areas where the federal government or federal grant and aid would be helpful?
Well, certainly I would take the Medicaid money. When you turn down Medicaid money, when governor turns down Medicaid money, doesn't mean people don't get sick or that they're not going to the hospitals. This just means we're not getting money to pay for it. It makes no sense at all. So I would definitely take the Medicaid money. And that's money that comes into our economy, that creates jobs, but it makes healthcare more affordable for everyone. Because, when we push people off and we push them onto the exchange, that just drives up the costs on the exchange for people overall. I've talked to local communities where they have hospitals who are now seeing less in terms of their reimbursements because fewer people are on Medicaid. And maybe the people got insurance on the exchange, but they have a large deductible, which then they're not able to meet. And so the impact on our community hospitals is significant as well. Governor Walker also turned down money to expand broadband in rural areas of the state. When we talk about that decrease of 5% in jobs in northern Wisconsin, we have to be thinking about how we can improve the infrastructure like broadband instead of saying we're turning down federal money for this.
You told Wisconsin Public Radio that you aren't going to be able to self-fund this election.
Mm-hmm.
I assume that means you're still going to put more money into the race, right?
I am going to put in more money, yes, but it's a fraction of what will be needed.
Okay. And do you have any idea how much you can put in? You said you're not Ron Johnson, you're not Herb Cole. So are we talking 4 million, 5 million? How much are we talking about?
I don't know what that is, Dan. All I can tell you, it will be a fraction of what is needed.
Yeah, every Republican press release now is calling you Trek heiress or millionaire Mary.
Well, the millionaire Mary, we've heard that for the last 6 or 7, 8, 9 months. So, it's just, I think they just use it as a fundraising ploy. I mean, my brother-in-law gets these letters and emails and always shares them with me. My family has to chuckle a little bit. It's just, I think Walker is trying to just distract from how much money he is raising and the fact that he will be greatly outspending me and that he has folks like the Republican Governors Association already spending $1.5 million. So that's really what he's trying to distract from.
I think we have time for one more question. Anyone want it? Well, I'll ask it then. This is a political job. You're running for governor. Governor Walker has been a politician virtually his entire career. You haven't. Should that give voters any pause? You really don't have much experience knowing how to play politics in Madison and run the government.
You know what? I hear it all the time. People are frustrated with politicians. I think they've just had it up to here. I think that people want to have a leader who they can trust, who they believe, whose believes a promise is a promise, and their word is their bond, and that's where I come at it. I come at it as a business executive, as someone who's worked in education, who's been a leader in my community, and I have no doubts that I can manage things in Madison and in state government in a way that is going to be in the best interests of people. And frankly, the games that politicians are playing now don't have to do with the people of Wisconsin. It has to do with just continuing to stay in power and get reelected. And it's time. It's time to not have politicians in charge.
Okay, thanks.